Imagine this: passive income machines that print cash while you sleep. Vending is sold relentlessly online as the ultimate side hustle. Low overhead, no employees, no rent, no storefront. Buy a machine, drop it in a busy spot, watch quarters, or Apple Pay taps, turn into a paycheck. The industry itself leans into this. U.S. vending operators are projected to generate roughly $7.9 billion in revenue in 2026, and the entry ticket looks shockingly low. Let's sit in the fantasy for a second, because it's a good one, and it's good because it's not entirely wrong. It's a clean story. It is also, like most clean stories about money, missing the part where things get complicated. The reality gut punch. Here's the word doing all the heavy lifting in every vending pitch you've ever seen: passive. It is not passive. It is one of the most misleadingly labeled business models in the entire small business world because the machine itself is passive, sitting there, humming, waiting, but the business around the machine is not. Someone has to source products. Someone has to load a vehicle. Someone has to drive a route, sometimes for hours, to visit machines that might only need $40 of restocking. Someone has to physically open the machine, count the cash, reconcile it against what the machine's software says should be there, and figure out why those two numbers don't match. Someone has to notice the machine in the break room hasn't sold a bag of chips in 3 weeks and figure out whether that's a product problem or a location problem. That someone is you. And here's the part that really breaks the fantasy. The machine's earning potential is almost entirely determined by something you don't control and often can't fully evaluate until after you've already committed: the location. Industry data on this is blunt. The same machine, same products, same pricing, can generate $75 a month in one spot and $7,500 a month in another. Not double, not triple, 100 times the difference. And there is no reliable way to know in advance which one you're getting, because foot traffic, employee break habits, nearby competition, and a dozen other invisible factors decide the outcome, not you. So the passive income machine turns out to be a logistics business with a location lottery bolted on top. That's the gut punch. Let me tell you what you're actually buying. Taxonomy: what vending machine business actually means. Vending machine business is a lazy umbrella term. Underneath it are at least 5 genuinely different businesses, with different capital requirements and different risk profiles. First, traditional coin and bill machines. Snacks, soda, cold food. This is the cheapest entry point and also the thinnest margin version of the business. It's the one most people picture, and it's the one most beginners buy into. Second, cashless or smart machines. These have card readers, remote sales monitoring, and software that tells you in real time what's selling and what's sitting dead on the shelf. They cost more upfront, but they solve one of vending's oldest problems: running your route blind. Without that data, you're driving to machines based on guesswork instead of evidence. Third, micro-markets. Think open shelving, refrigerated cases, and a self-checkout kiosk instead of a locked box. These need bigger locations, offices, warehouses, distribution centers, but they can generate more revenue per site meaningfully because customers can buy more than one item and aren't limited by a coil mechanism. Fourth, specialty and novelty vending. Cotton candy machines, phone case printers, electronics. These are the machines marketed hardest online right now because they promise premium margins and a wow factor that basic snack machines don't have. They also cost dramatically more, think $13,000 to $25,000 per unit, and carry a real risk of being a fad that stops converting the moment the novelty wears off. Fifth, route acquisition. Instead of building a route machine by machine, you buy an existing operator's machines and their locations as a package. This sounds like the smart shortcut. Skip the years of cold calling businesses for placement and just buy a working, revenue-generating route. We'll come back to this one, because it's also where some of the worst outcomes in this entire industry happen. Entry costs. Let's put real numbers on the table, because low cost of entry means very different things depending on which of those 5 businesses you're actually buying into. A basic operation, 2 to 3 traditional machines, will typically run $5,000 to $15,000 all in, covering the machines themselves, initial inventory, business registration, and insurance. A single modern machine, on the cashless and connected end, runs $4,000 to $9,000 depending on features. Specialty and novelty machines are the outlier, $13,000 to $25,000 or more per unit, once you include installation and licensing. And if you want a realistic first-year budget for a small, sane operation, not the aggressive growth version, just a person trying this out properly, you're looking at $8,000 to $12,000, covering your first machine, your first round of stock, registration, and insurance. None of that is a huge number by small business standards. That's genuinely the appeal. But entry cost was never the part of this business that quietly kills people. It's what comes after. The hidden costs. This is where the fantasy really starts to leak. Start with location commission. Most viable placements, the break rooms, the gyms, the office lobbies, don't just let you drop a machine for free. The location wants a cut of the sales, sometimes structured as a flat monthly fee, sometimes as a percentage. New operators routinely negotiate this poorly, either because they're desperate for any placement or because they don't yet understand their own margin well enough to know what they can afford to give away. That commission comes straight out of the top of your revenue, before you've paid for a single bag of chips. Then there's the cost per stop, and this one rarely appears in the online pitch. Every time you drive out to service a machine, industry estimates put the real cost, once you count labor, fuel, and vehicle wear, at somewhere between $50 and $100. That's the cost of the visit, independent of what the machine actually sells. Drive out to a machine that's barely moved product since your last visit, and you've effectively paid money to look at it. Related to that, the empty run. You drive 30 minutes to a machine expecting a normal restock, and it turns out the machine sold almost nothing since your last visit, or you show up with the wrong product mix entirely, because you were going off memory instead of data. Either way, that trip cost you real money and returned nothing. Then there's shrinkage, and here the industry data cuts against the popular fear. New operators tend to be terrified of machine break-ins and vandalism. Those do happen, especially in poorly secured or unsupervised outdoor locations. But cash theft from the inside of a machine without cashless payment is actually more common than the dramatic break-in scenario. A quieter, slower bleed that's harder to notice because there's no broken glass to point to, just a collection number that doesn't quite match what it should. And finally, cost creep. Supplier prices rise. Cashless transaction processing fees change. Insurance premiums move. Commission arrangements that made sense the day you signed them stop making sense 2 years later. Operators who set their pricing once and never revisit it don't get hit by one dramatic event, they just watch their margin quietly compress, with no single moment they can point to and say that's when it went wrong. The real profit mechanism. So where's the actual money? It lives in the spread between what you pay wholesale for a product and what the machine sells it for, minus whatever commission the location takes. Reported net margins across the industry run in the 20 to 35% range, with some premium snack and beverage categories claiming as high as 50%. But margin percentage is almost meaningless on its own. What matters is the dollar amount per machine, and that number is smaller than most people expect. A basic machine in a moderate traffic location might net somewhere between $40 and $120 a month. Not per day, per month. Put that same machine in a genuinely high traffic, well-selected spot, and that can jump to $800 to $1,500 a month or more. The same equipment, the same products, a completely different outcome because of where it's standing. This is why the business only starts to look like real income at density. A 10-machine route might net $500 to $1,200 a month combined. A well-run 25-machine route can reach $1,200 to $3,000 a month. And if the goal is six-figure annual income, most operators need to be running somewhere between 20 and 50 machines, all reasonably well placed, all serviced on a tight logistics loop. In other words, vending doesn't scale like a piece of software, where the 10th unit costs you nothing extra to run. It scales like a delivery route, where the 10th machine means another stop, another restock, another reconciliation, another chance for something to go wrong. The profit mechanism is real. It's just smaller, slower, and more labor-intensive per dollar than the fantasy implies. Structural risk and case study. Now here's the part of vending machine business that doesn't get talked about nearly enough, the structural risk baked into how routes actually get bought and sold. Remember taxonomy option 5, route acquisition. Buying someone else's existing, working route instead of building your own from scratch. On paper, this is the smart move. Why spend 2 years cold calling businesses for placement rights when you can just buy machines that are already earning? The problem is information asymmetry. When you buy a route, almost everything that actually determines its value, the true sales history, the quality of the locations, the stability of the commission arrangements, is invisible to you until after the money has changed hands. You're trusting the seller's numbers, because you have no independent way to verify them before you own the thing. Reality is that trust gets abused. There's a documented case out of Massachusetts. In 2022, the owner of a vending machine company was indicted for selling routes to buyers using fabricated financial statements, spreadsheets showing years of profits at locations that never actually produced them. Multiple buyers paid tens of thousands of dollars combined, in one case losing money for what the state's attorney general's office described, in essence, as an essentially worthless route. In at least one instance, after a buyer entrusted their machines back to the seller to be resold, the seller sold them to a third party and simply kept the proceeds. This isn't an isolated oddity, either. Vending has a long documented history of business opportunity fraud cases going back decades, where the core con is always some version of the same thing. Sell someone a machine and a promise, hand them fabricated or wildly optimistic earnings projections, and by the time they realize the real numbers don't match, the seller has already moved on to the next buyer. The structural risk of vending isn't theft from the machine. It's the fact that the single most important piece of due diligence, is this location actually good, is the one thing a buyer has almost no way to verify before they own it. Bull case versus bear case. So let's put the two honest futures side by side. The bull case, vending technology has genuinely improved. Cashless payment, remote sales monitoring, and real-time inventory data are closing the gap between the passive income myth and something closer to reality. An operator who treats this like the logistics business it actually is, who tracks data, prunes underperforming locations ruthlessly, and reinvests profit into better-placed machines instead of more machines, can build a vending machine route that, at 20 or 30 units, throws off genuine, semi-passive cash flow. It won't run itself, but it can eventually run on a few hours a week instead of a few hours a day. The bear case, most new operators don't do any of that. They buy the first machine or the first route without a rigorous way to judge location quality. They get squeezed on commission because they don't yet understand their own margin, and they discover, usually around month 4 or 5, that the $50 to $100 cost of every stop, multiplied across a route of mediocre locations, has quietly turned passive income into an unpaid part-time delivery job. Some of them, chasing the shortcut, buy an existing route from a seller they can't fully verify, and inherit someone else's dying locations along with someone else's fabricated spreadsheet. Both of these are real and common outcomes. The difference between them isn't luck. It's whether you treat location selection and route logistics as the actual business, or whether you bought into the fantasy that the machine was the business. The philosophical reframe. Here's the reframe we always land on, and vending might be the cleanest example of it we've covered. Vending isn't a machine business. It's a real estate business wearing a machine costume. The equipment itself is nearly commoditized. You can buy the same cashless snack machine as anyone else, from the same handful of manufacturers, for roughly the same price. The entire value of the enterprise doesn't live in the steel box. It lives in who controls the best 3 square feet of floor space in a building with reliable, repeat foot traffic. That's the asset. That's what separates the $75 a month machine from the $7,500 a month machine, sitting in identical hardware. Every ad selling you the vending fantasy is really selling you the box, and quietly hoping you never notice that the box was never the valuable part. The location was. And the location, the one thing that actually determines whether this business works, is almost always the one thing nobody can guarantee you before you've already paid. That's the real math behind the vending machine on the wall in your office break room. Not passive income. A tiny logistics operation, wrapped around a real estate bet, dressed up as a box that prints money while you sleep.